hard to come by. So that's something I've always wanted to learn more about. Live on the coast, and it seems like I don't know enough about the coast. So, yeah.
What about living in the Lower Mainland Indigenous community makes life harder, and why?
I think, to kind of circle back what I said earlier, there's a lot of like services, providers, organizations, whoever, but none of them are really connected to each other. A lot of them are like segregated services, and then when it comes to funding, some of them are like competing with each other, and I think it's like unfortunate we don't see more collaboration happen. Like, I think it divides the community itself a little bit. Like, oh, I'm with this organization, these are my youth, and da-da-da-da. It's like, well, these are community members. You know, we need to find more ways to collaborate. And there are some grassroots organizations that are working on building those collaborations, but from what I've seen and from what I've like experienced, it doesn't seem to be a lot of collaboration. And I think more of that needs to happen, because like when places are able to collaborate, you can get more done, in my opinion, and like have better outcomes and, well, staying under budget.
If you could get a journalist to investigate only one thing, what do you think it should be?
I think there needs to be, this is a very big question. So many things. Why do the Canucks keep losing? But more importantly, I think, just why there isn't more focus around building Indigenous leadership. I think that's something I've always been interested in and learning more about. And like, as an Indigenous person, I feel like, well, I've been empowered through volunteering and putting myself out there and being an outgoing person, but like, what about the person who's introverted and has like a very different way of learning and thinking? And like, it definitely feels like there's not enough focus on leadership and how we can build more leadership within Indigenous people. And like, I think that leads to a lot of like things that are happening right now. And I think like if we had more like ability to build Indigenous people up to be leaders and to be confident in what they do, I definitely could see more opportunities and growth within the community itself.
City Council just finished its round of budget meetings and passed this new budget. Next time around, what issues do you think should be at the top of their budget business?
I mean, definitely prioritizing things like how can we make things more accessible in the city. I think that's something they kind of always talk about in some ways, but like, yeah, it feels like some places just aren't super accessible. And like, I don't know, I feel like things need to be easier accessed. And like, I also just in general wish that there was more like, I don't know, community spaces, I guess. Like, just like if I wanted to go sit somewhere, it's actually I just realized the other day, it's very difficult to go and do that. And I feel like there needs to be a bigger thing around that. I know I've heard previous city council people talk about that, but like, I definitely think that's a big thing. Especially for Indigenous people. Like, we grew up in these big communities and like had community spaces, like even, you know, back in the day, and that was something I was learning about recently, and that's definitely one. And then like focusing on other things like, I could name a whole list. I should like do a top 3. So definitely community spaces being 1. 2, I think giving more employment opportunities for Indigenous youth, like specifically. I think that there are some employment opportunities for Indigenous people in certain levels and even in certain levels of government now, but like, I think there needs to be more because there's just more Indigenous youth and there needs to be more opportunities. And then just like, I feel like transparency around like school needs to be better in some way. This is something I've talked about with someone else in particular, is like learning about post-secondary and stuff is really difficult unless you know like a counselor, a teacher, or somebody. And just reading stuff online seems very difficult. Like, if I wanted to learn a career path, say in social work, it feels like I have to jump through many hoops just to do that. So, I think making information just more accessible, learning about different degrees and that kind of stuff, I think, especially here in the city where we do have multiple campuses and multiple like places you could go. And yeah, so I think it's definitely my top 3.
What is something you want people who aren't part of your community to know about your community?
Oh, this is a great question. I think that like Indigenous people have a lot more to offer than what has been like put out there